I was just about to check the Schumann resonance because I'm curious what's happening because I feel like shit. Feel like shit, people. Oh, yeah. Damn, dude. We've got some big, massive whiteouts happening right now. You see the white there? Yeah. For real, though. So, the last, 4 days, I think, has been super crazy on the Schumann resonance level. So I didn't feel so good, but I will tell you I am here to read, and if it's hard on my body and I can't do it, then I'll just stop midway through and just start talking. I'm doing my best to keep consistent with this book because I want to get through it. Yeah. Anyway, okay. Chapter 11. Tune in, turn on. Oh, sorry. The opposite. Turn on, tune in, become a robot. Along with CIA mind control programs, media manipulation, and Kinsey's sexual revolution in the 1950s and 60s, America was ripe for another ambitious operation. The restructuring of American society through the use of psychedelic drugs and mysticism. As illogical as it may seem at first glance, the LSD drugging of the world and an accompanying injection of mystical religion fits neatly into the New World Order. And eugenics. Intention for population control and a post-technological world. I'm going to read that again because that was a huge sentence. Was it not? That was a huge sentence. As illogical as it may seem at first glance, the LSD drugging of the world and an accompanying injection of mystical religion fits neatly into the New World Order. And eugenics. Intention for population control and a post-technological world. Believing that the world is overpopulated and that resources are being squandered through consumption by the masses, dystopian social visionaries epitomized by those of Tavistock and the Club of Rome have repeatedly urged that the solution is a return to a mystical primitivism, at least for the vast majority of the world's population. And that primitivism, they seem to believe, can be furthered through the use of drugs and mysticism. Strangely, LSD may be a byproduct of German occultism. According to Captain Alfred Hubbard, the intelligence agency Johnny Appleseed of LSD, the drug was discovered years prior to its announced discovery by Albert Hofmann. So there's Captain Alfred Hubbard and there's Albert Hofmann. Hubbard, Hofmann, Albert, Alfred. That's interesting. In a project mounted by members of the Rudolf Steiner's Anthroposophy, an offshoot of Blavatsky's occultist theosophy group, to discover a peace pill. Now that's interesting. Because Rudolf Steiner, I happen to, respect his Waldorf school and his biodynamic farming. So, discovering a peace pill, hey? The documented history of LSD begins much later. The magic proponent of the acid drugging of America was Aldous Huxley, Brave New World author, the grandson of British imperialist Thomas Huxley, one of the founders of the Rhodes Round Table. Oh, that's interesting. The materialist Thomas Huxley was referred to during his life as Darwin's bulldog for his efforts at suppressing opposition to Darwinism and his frank advocacy of genocide for the Australian Aborigine for eugenics purposes. Yikes. Aldous Huxley was a lifelong collaborator with Arnold Toynbee, who was on the council of the Round Table's Royal Institute of International Affairs and was the head of British Intelligence's Research Division. In a 1971 dialogue with Kei Watsuzumi of Kyoto Sangyo University, Toynbee said, quote, "If I am right in forecasting that a world dictatorship is likely to be the way in which we shall avoid liquidating ourselves in an atomic war, and if I live to see this development, I should on the whole be optimistic, because I should not expect the dictatorship to be permanent. It is most unlikely, I fear, that it will be established by the will or even with the acquiescence of the majority of mankind. It seems to be likely to be imposed on the majority by a ruthless, efficient, and fanatical minority inspired by some ideology or religion. I guess that mankind will acquiesce in a harsh Leninian kind of dictatorship as a lesser evil than self-extermination, or than a continuing anarchy which could end only in self-extermination. If the reluctant majority does accept this dictatorship on this ground, I think they will be making the right choice." Yeah, no. Huxley was tutored by Fabian socialist and pivotal New World Order theorist H. G. Wells, author of The Open Conspiracy, and other books detailing the intentions of the International New World Order faction. Wells was the head of British intelligence during World War I, who proposed the creation of a one-world brain, soberingly similar in conception to that of today's internet, that would ultimately act as a police of the mind. It has been reported that Huxley was a member of the Children of the Sun, a mystical free-love cult of children of the Round Table in Britain that may have shared more than just its name with the German Sonnenkinder, the term used to designate the eugenically bred, racially pure, Lebensborn children of Nazi Germany. There is more to suggest that this connection than just the name of the group. Members of the British Children of the Sun are reported to have included the fascist Sir Oswald Mosley, British intelligence agency agent George Orwell, and Guy Burgess. Burgess was one of the founders of the homosexual Freemasonry and higher sodomy of the Apostles at Cambridge, a founder of the pro-Nazi Anglo-German Fellowship in England, a paid agent of the Rothschild family private intelligence network, and his most famous role, a Soviet spy. Other members of the Apostles' homosexual cabal included Soviet spies Blunt, Philby, and McLean, who were largely responsible for the massive compromise of Western intelligence to the Soviets that began in the 1930s. Huxley was a collaborator with Tavistock's Major John Rawlings Rees and author of the influential Brave New World. Among other eugenics ideas in the book is the strict structuralization of society through test tube breeding, with the lowest members of society denied oxygen, during their fetal growth to reduce intelligence. In Brave New World Revisited, the book's non-fictional sequel, he wrote, quote, "The 21st century will be the era of the world controllers. The older dictators fell because they could never supply their subjects with enough bread, enough circuses, enough miracles and mysteries. Under a scientific dictatorship, education will really work." I'm going to read that again. Under a scientific dictatorship, education will really work, with the result that most men and women will grow up to love their servitude and will never dream of revolution. There seems to be no good reason why a thoroughly scientific dictatorship should ever be overthrown. Huxley came to America from Britain shortly after the first published findings about LSD in 1949. He was accompanied by his friend, Dr. Humphrey Osmond, who, once in America, immediately set up about toiling in the MK-Ultra minefields, including turning on his friend to acid, while Huxley was the seed crystallizing dozens of LSD and mystico-religious projects, both official and informal. Huxley was also friends with George Estabrooks, who had done early work into the creation of mind control assassins and hypnotically installed multiple personalities, and worked with Andrija Puharich, an early researcher into the effects of electromagnetics on humans. Certainly, Huxley cannot have been aware of the effects that the widespread distribution of LSD might bring about. He wrote, "Now let us consider another kind of drug, still undiscovered, but probably just around the corner. A drug capable of making people happy in situations where they would normally feel miserable. Such a drug would be a blessing, but a blessing fraught with grave potential dangers. By making a harmless chemical euphoric freely available, a dictator could reconcile an entire population to a state of affairs to which self-respecting human beings ought not to be reconciled." Huxley, who also was a pal of CIA mind control kingpin Louis Jolyon West, Jolly, was responsible for turning on dozens of persons who went on to proselytize the mystical religion and acid, including Alan Watts, Ken Kesey, members of the Grateful Dead musical group, and anthropologist Gregory Bateson, who had been a psychological planner for the OSS. From the ranks of persons turned on directly or indirectly by Aldous Huxley, an entire generation was mentally regrooved. Supporting the idea that Huxley may have had an agenda other than enlightening America to the Buddha mind, an FBI memorandum from 1968 states that Grateful Dead band leader Jerry Garcia was used to channel youth dissent and rebellion into more benign and non-threatening directions. It is not known whether Garcia was a witting collaborator in this channeling. Huxley's most influential acolyte was Dr. Timothy Leary, who in the 1950s coasted on 8 monetary grants from the National Institute of Mental Health, a pipeline for CIA funding. Leary was first turned on to LSD by his longtime friend, CIA agent Frank Barron. In an interview for High Times magazine in February 1978, Leary said, quote, "If you look back, many things that we thought were accidents turned out were not accidents. The entire LSD movement itself was sponsored originally by the CIA, to whom I give great credit. I would not be here today if it had not been for the foresight and prestige of the CIA psychologists, so give the CIA credit for being truly an intelligence agency." End quote. Mind control researcher Walter Boert interviewed Leary in the 70s, and the acid guru had some interesting things to say about his association with the CIA. Asked, "Do you think CIA people were involved in your group in the 60s?" Leary responded, "Of course they were. I would say that 80% of my movements, 80% of the decisions I made were suggested to me by CIA people. I like the CIA. The game they're playing is better than the FBI, better than the Saigon police, better than Franco's police, better than the Israeli police, and they're 1,000 times better than the KGB. So it comes down to, who are you going to work for, the Yankees or the Dodgers?" Boert might have responded that one could simply drop out from the game, as Leary had counseled an entire generation. Leary sang the praises of the CIA throughout the interview. Asked whether he had been used by the CIA, Leary said, "I've known this for 10 years. In an attempt to pin him down, Boert asked, "You were wittingly used by the CIA?" Leary hedged, "Wait, when you say CIA, it's like saying niggers. I knew I was being used by the intelligence agents of this country." That is something that Leary would say, though. Asked again whether he wittingly worked for the CIA, Leary answered forcefully, "Yes, I was a witting agent of the CIA, but I am not a willing agent of Nixon. I did everything in my power to throw out Nixon." Boert asked him, "So you work for the Central Intelligence Agency? Is it the Deputy Director of Plans you work for? Who makes out your checks?" "It's none of your business to know how those things work," was Leary's response. "I'll answer you no questions that have to do with business. I'll answer you any question about history or people." After the interview, Boert, as well as several friends of Leary who were present, agreed that this was not the same man we'd known before he'd gone to prison. "We couldn't tell if he'd changed because of the normal prison brutality or because he was under some great pressures or had been tortured," Boert said. "The first thought I had when seeing the altered Leary was, he's been the victim of one of the secret prison mind control programs." There is additional confirmation that Leary himself was the guinea pig of his esteemed intelligence agents. Boert relates that while Leary was in Folsom Prison, he was held incommunicado for a period of time, and that, according to his wife Joanna Harcourt Smith Leary, when he was finally allowed to visit her, he seemed radically different. His head had been shaved, and he was bruised and pale. The information was confirmed by a former convict who's told Boert that during the period when Leary could not be located by his wife, the acid guru was given fright drugs. Anacontin is one drug that induces hysterical fear, and kept in solitary confinement in order to break him down. Leary returned to their cell with his head shaved and blue lines painted on it. Wow. According to the man, well, one day he comes back to the cell with lines on his head. They were actually very precise measurement lines. His head was shaved, and it was marked with all these careful, precise blue lines. I asked him what the lines were for. He told me they were going to give him a lobotomy. They were going to stick ice picks into his brain. He told me that it was really going to be great. They had him completely brainwashed. He said, "This is going to be the greatest thing. All my life I've been going through this. You get up, you get down, but now," he said, "I'll just be just as smart as I am, but I won't have to feel emotions anymore." Wow. Leary's initial intelligence handler may have been British agent Michael Hollingshead, yet another friend of Aldous Huxley. Hollingshead first provided Leary with acid, and according to reports of the period, Leary idolized him. One of Leary's major supporters was William Billy Mellon Hitchcock, heir to Gulf Oil, nephew to financier Andrew Mellon, and alleged to be a broker for money interests that included the Mafia and the CIA. Mellon family foundations have long been used as a conduit for CIA monies, and several members of the family have been members of American intelligence agencies. Hitchcock's father was a university roommate with David Bruce, a chief of technological intelligence of the OSS. During his tenure at the agency, CIA Director Richard Helms, the man who conceived of MKUltra, was a close friend of the Mellons, as was Averell Harriman. There it is again. Hitchcock was the largest investor in Resorts International, a consortium where a number of clandestine interests met, including British intelligence and the networks of mafia kingpins Tabor Rosenbaum and Meyer Lansky. Some researchers have convincingly figured Resorts International as part of the cabal that sponsored the killing of John F. Kennedy. Others involved in the acid drugging of the world included Captain Alfred M. Hubbard of the OSS, the Treasury Department, the Federal Narcotics Bureau, and the Food and Drug Administration. And, it is alleged, the Mafia, who acted as a Johnny Appleseed of LSD. Hubbard, who first took LSD in 1951 and guided Aldous Huxley through his second mescaline trip, distributed huge amounts of agency acid around the world. While he was passing out LSD, Hubbard also led raids on the LSD labs of rebel chemists, suggesting that Hubbard might have been an elitist who thought that acid was the only good enough for the commissar class. Or he just didn't want any competition. In 1968, at the height of the hippie phase, Hubbard joined the world's largest military research think tank, Stanford Research Institute, as an investigator. This was done at the behest of Tavistock-associated Willis Harman, at that time the director of the SRI Center for the Study of Social Policy, and reported to have himself been an experimenter with LSD. SRI was founded in 1946, reportedly by agents of the Tavistock Institute, and its first contracts were obtained from the defense establishment. SRI had already received Army money for research into chemical incapacitants, as well as for the alleged 1958 Project Shaky, delving into using the environment as a weapon through weather wars and controlled earthquakes. SRI is linked in its database with 2,500 other organizations, including the CIA, Bell Telephone, U.S. Army Intelligence, the Office of Naval Intelligence, RAND, Harvard, and MIT. Harman wrote to Hubbard saying, quote, Our investigations of some of the current social movements affecting education indicate that the drug usage prevalent among student members of the New Left is not entirely undesigned. Some of it appears to be present as a deliberate weapon aimed at political change. We are concerned with assessing the significance of this as it impacts on matters of long-range educational philosophy. In this connection, it would be advantageous to have you considered in the capacity of a special investigative agent who might have access to relevant data which is not ordinarily available. End quote. Well, who would have been promoting drug usage among student members of the New Left? Surely Harman didn't think it was the communists. This sounds more to me like a cant language proposal for carrying out political change. Hubbard was employed by SRI ostensibly as a security guard. In fact, his actual work took place under the auspices of their Alternative Futures program. I'm sorry, what? Alternative Futures program. Okay. A corporate strategy program that reminds one that Hubbard had his own corporate strategy of turning business and political leaders onto LSD. The LSD drugging of America was not limited to experimentation performed on adults. In the proceedings of the 19th Annual Convention and Scientific Program of the Society of Biological Psychiatry that took place in Los Angeles on May 13, 1964, it is reported, quote, in the children's unit of Creedmoor State Hospital with a resident population of 450 patients ages 4 to 15, we have investigated the responses of some of these children to lysergic acid and related drugs in the psychiatric, psychological, and biochemical areas. Two groups of boys receiving daily LSD, UML, which is a methylated derivative of LSD, or psilocybin. At first, the medication was given weekly, but was eventually given daily for periods up to several months. Dosages remained constant throughout. LSD, 150 micrograms. Psilocybin, 20 micrograms. Daily or UML, 20 micrograms daily. Or UML, 12 micrograms daily, all given in 2 divided doses. The average duration of treatment was 2 to 3 months. It is not necessary to comment at length on the magnitude of the LSD drugging program and its mystical retooling of the American psyche in the 1960s. The varied results of that operation, the destruction of much of political activism in America, the birth of the quiche-breathed, lockstepping yuppies, the alienated and politically impotent punks and Gen X, and the drug gang fetishism of both black and white gangsta culture are testimony to the effectiveness of this far-reaching pacification program. Wow. I don't even know where I want to start with that. While I was reading that, I was having a memory of Timothy Leary. I met him in Hollywood when I was on a set. He worked on a movie with me, and I cannot for the life of me remember what movie it was. I think I was like 24 years old or something. So it's been a long time. But I remember asking him, because his skin was purple, And I remember asking him about his oxygenation of his blood, and like if he was getting I've been kind of bold my whole life in terms of asking people blunt questions and like straightforward questions, right? And I asked him why his we were all having lunch, right? And I was sitting next to him and I looked at him and I said, I'm trying to remember exactly what I said. I was like, your skin, it's purple. He goes, yeah. Well, that's what happens with years and years of acid. And I said, yeah, I can imagine that's true. I said, you're pickled. He goes, well, I wouldn't say I'm pickled. And I said, well, what would you call it then? And he said, well, I said, how many doses of acid are you on right now? Because I can, like, he's like, yeah, I maintain at like anywhere from 100 to 1,000 doses, depending on the situation that I'm in. Right now, I'm on about 100 doses. Or, yeah. Yeah, he said doses. He didn't say micrograms. He said doses. And I was like, I just sat there. I didn't even have a response. I really didn't know what to say or think or even comprehend at that moment. But I just remember observing him and being like, I can't believe you're still alive, bro. Like it was just like unbelievable to me that he was able to walk and talk and like that he was on 100 hits of acid, That's what he said. I'm on 100 hits of acid or something like that. It was mind-blowing to me, and it was actually like meeting the legendary Tim Leary, right? Like I was just like, I'm not a starstruck kind of person. And I guess because I was around a lot of those people for a good majority of my life. And so I don't have that same starstruck thing where I'm like, I just don't have that. And so what I've noticed about that is that celebrities and famous people and really powerful people in the world, their response to me is very different than what it might be to someone else who's acting that way. Because I just talk to them like they're a normal human being. It doesn't matter who they are to me. I don't hold that, in my field. I'm not starstruck. So, and I was in Hollywood for 20 years. So I have a lot of background with being around super famous people and super rich and powerful people and not having any reaction to them. And that actually makes them curious about me because I'm not impressed by them. So they tend to like want to know who I am or what I'm about because I'm not falling at their feet, So in relation to this, I wanted to share two of my acid stories, like on both sides of the spectrum. At 24 years old, before I got sober, I had an experience where I saw like demons in people, and I was at this party and I like couldn't get out of the party, and like I was being chased around the house by people, but the people that I was being chased by were like entities, right? Like demonic faces, and like their faces were like warping and shit. And I was just like, fuck this. I am never doing acid again. Like, fuck this bullshit, right? And then I did do it another time, and I had a completely opposite experience of it where I I was like in the forest and like crying, and I had like mixed it with a little bit of mushrooms, and like so I was like crying in the forest and like having this like magical experience with like the Sasquatch and the freaking dragons and like all these mystical creatures and like the grandmother tree. I was just getting all this information from, the elemental beings of the forest. And like it was a really strong forest where I was, of course, but really out in nature. But it was just cool, man, because I'd had such a bad experience with that other experience that it was really nice to have like polar opposite in nature, where it actually was like a profound experience for me. Um, and so for me, I've tended to stay away from any sort of mind altering substances since I was about 24, because, I was an addict and I was an alcoholic, and I was also involved in a lot of mind control programs. And so it took a lot for me to dismantle the mind control that was going on in my consciousness and to get myself back, get my soul back, to get my personality back. And I think it's important to hear this information because, I mean, what I just read, dude, it's like telling us what's going on right now. Like literally what's going on right now is in this book from 20 years ago. And this is when a lot of people weren't even talking about this kind of stuff. This is 20 years old, this book. So, sorry, I'll hold it up so you can see it. And the reason why I never say the name of the book is because I don't need to. It's all right there for you to read in big, big letters. And what's important is that this guy that wrote this book did his research. Like, he really, really was a researched author. He wasn't just some rando trying to get famous off this shit. Like, he was a real researcher and a real book author, right? So these are the people that I actually respect when it comes to information on this level, is to go back and actually look at those types of books. There's actually another book about NASA that I want to read. The Dark Mission of NASA, I think it's called. Really intense book, which might be another story time. But right now, I feel like this is the most pertinent book I could be reading because it literally has to do with mind control and mass manipulation of the population. And that's exactly what we're dealing with. Exactly what we're dealing with right now. And yet, at the same time, I actually have a strong propensity to believe, and I'm not saying that I'm 100%, but I'm pretty freaking close, to believing that we are stepping into the golden age, and this is the end of control. And it's the end of all of those things, and coming back into right relations, into where full transparency is required in order to exist. And that's going to look a little messy for a while, I think, but necessary for our lives to move forward and for us to have full embodiment and full power and full resonance with each other and harmony with our heart's intelligence and loving each other. Feels really important to do that. I don't think that this world that we're living in right now is by mistake. I believe it's definitely by design, up until this point and what we're experiencing. And I also know that Spirit's not going to allow it to continue, and that's why we're seeing what we're seeing, which is the efforts to end human trafficking, and the biggest, pandemic that we're really dealing with is not a virus. It's pedophilia and cannibalism and vampirism and blood drinking and a drug called adrenochrome, which is the most sought after drug on the planet, which you can buy on a fucking website. Like, what? Yeah. Not only that, but humans are being trafficked and sold online in storage containers. I mean, oh my God. People are paying $10,000 to have a human shipped to their house so that they can torture and abuse them, rape them, and then kill them and dispose of them. It's real. It's absolutely real what's happening right now and what's being exposed. right? And people are going to be exposed to this information, and it's going to shock the world. It's definitely going to shock the world. And those of us who have had time to digest this information are in a better position to support others with what's coming. And I've been talking about this for a while, you guys. I've been talking about this for years, actually. But this particular aspect of it, where there's going to be a huge wake up, I've been talking about that for this entire year, if not longer. Like last year, I was talking about it too. Because in August of last year, I realized and had an experience where I realized that the transfer of power was actually happening on the planet, and that it was real, and I was feeling it on an energetic level. I was experiencing it on an energetic level, and I saw the shift start. And I was part of that. And so for me, like, I need to be where that is. I need to be positioned where that frequency is the truth of my reality, and not any sort of fear or any idea that it's one way or the other. I'm here, I'm riding the wave, and I am completely and utterly in service to Spirit, my prime directive. And that's not going to change. That's not going to change. That is so solid in me that there's no way that I can be manipulated. I've had plenty of that. I'm done with that. And so for me, it's really important for me to stay aligned with my own understanding of that, and who I am as a person, and why I'm here, and what that looks like. And stay grounded in my body and stay in a practical environment. That's important for me. It's easy for me to float around and to be traveling and to doing those things too and still be grounded. However, it's really good for me to have a home base. And I find that it's taken me a long time to understand that. And it wasn't due to the fact that I didn't desire it. It was more due to the fact that I was being derailed all the time. And it takes a lot just for me to stay grounded, like financially. And so, I had so many fragments of my consciousness that were everywhere. They were just like flitted around, like they were everywhere. And I had no framework for my consciousness at a certain point after I'd been, utilized. It's the only word that ever comes to mind when I think about it. And it took a long time for me to get my sanity back and to resort my brain out and to get into my body and to be grounded here in this reality. My dad asked me one time, he's like, prove to you why you give so much credence to this and not to this. And I just looked at him like, what? And like, I'm an adult at this point. I'm like in my late 30s, and he's saying this to me, right? And I just looked at him like, I don't need to answer that. Like, what? Okay. And he's like, well, when you figure it out, you let me know. I said, all right, Dad. Okay. It's atheist scientist, right? Deep state. So my dad was not a nice man. I'll just say that. I loved him dearly, but he was not a nice man. So he was charming too. Everybody loved him, but they weren't his daughter, So later I walked downstairs and I said to him, the answer to that question, Dad? And he said, yeah. I said, it's just not time yet. I can live with that. I said, awesome. I couldn't explain to him why spirit was so important to me. Like I couldn't explain to him why I had such an allegiance to God. That was really what he was asking me, was like, why do you have such an allegiance to something outside of yourself and not to the physical and not to this world, right? And for me, I was just a spiritual being. There was no explanation for it. There was no way for me to describe to him what I was experiencing if he wasn't having the same experience. I couldn't like wake him up from his slumber. Like I knew that was impossible. I tried for years to wake him up. It never worked. He went to his grave the way, sworn under oath, never spoke a word of what he had seen, witnessed, experienced, and knew about. It was only until he was on the other side and I had removed the curse off my entire family and had done all the work to relieve the Dark Lord from my DNA that I was able to have a conversation with him that made any sense whatsoever. And at that point, he was able to say through someone else, a Native American brother, friend of mine, he literally spoke through my Native American brother's, I call him Rainbow Jesus. He spoke through Rainbow Jesus's mouth to me the 2 mornings after he passed. And he explained to me that he, in fact, did not know the extent of the damage that had been done during those programs. And he was asking for my forgiveness, right? For signing me up for these freaking programs, right? And this guy didn't know me at the time. You have to understand, this guy did not know me at all when this was happening. He had no idea who I was or what I was about. He was literally channeling my dad. My dad, I could feel my dad with this man. It was incredible. And we were in Peru, of all places. And I just remember the fire in me, just like the dragon fire. I was so angry. I was so pissed. I was like, how fucking dare you? This is my time right now. First you die while I'm boarding the plane to Peru, and then you're asking for my forgiveness, and you're speaking about this through this other person that I don't even know. It was like total humiliation, right? But then I turned it around for myself. I was being attacked, by the way, from all the Dark Lords in our bloodline that had been attached to our bloodline. They were coming after me left, right, and center. Every single person. Like it was crazy. And I don't even know why I'm telling this story, but I think it's important for me to say. So I said to my dad, I'm like, all right, Dad, you get to watch what I do now. You get to watch my experience in the world, and you get to be with me on this trip with all these people, guiding through them through the sacred valley of Peru, and you get to watch me. You get to go on this trip and be on this journey with me. So I'm inviting you to be on this journey with me, but you can't fuck with me. I was like, whoosh. I had to be that way with my dad because he was so harsh that like I had to be harsh back. I always had to stand up to my dad. And so he was with us through that whole experience, and he got to witness me in my spirituality, in my integrating heaven and earth and grounding it here. He got to witness that. He got to hike Huayna Picchu with me. He got to be on the mountain of Machu Picchu. And that is something he had always wanted to do. And the only person in our family that had done it was my sister. And so I was doing it, and he had never had a chance to do it. So it was kind of cool because he got to tour Peru with us, right? In spirit. He got to be there, even though he was on the other side, right? That's really cool, actually. But had I not done LSD or mind-altering substances in the past, my psychic, well, I can't say that my psychic abilities wouldn't have been so sharp, but I do know that the mind-altering substances that I did do were, 1, self-medicating, and 2, seeking a connection with spirit, with source, and 3, that I had already been manipulated as a child with psychedelics. And so my psychic abilities were like off the charts, right? And this gave me an opportunity to actually communicate with my father, right? And actually have a conversation with him and be with him and be present with him as if he was right next to me in the room, because literally it's only a doorway. If you're earthbound, it's literally like you're right here. It's like you're not in a body, but your consciousness is still here, and you could literally manifest a body if you knew what was happening and if you knew what to do, but most people don't, right? So anyway, he was here with me, and I was able to like take him on the journey with me. And it wasn't until a couple of months later, after I had a 2.5 hour conversation with him after returning from Peru, between the time that he had died and when he was buried, and when we had his wake, his funeral, that he was able to sort things out in his consciousness around what had happened. And we had a conversation about it. And I said, you got to make this right. You've got to make this right, Dad. You participated in the destruction of humanity. You have to participate in making this right from the other side now. This is your job. I'm assigning you a job. I was like straight up about it, you know? And interestingly enough, another psychic friend of mine who had no contact with my dad, didn't know my dad from Adam or whatever, she happened to observe him in this situation where he was making deals with the galactics, like trying to repair the situation from the other side. And she contacted me and she said, this is going to sound really weird, but I observed your father, in negotiations with galactics on the other side, and he's trying to repair everything, like make amends for what he's done. And like, I was just like, wow, okay. So he did hear me, right? Like he was in the room. He did hear me. We had a conversation. He actually heard me. So for me, I think that having the ability to see beyond the veil, which is no longer, I mean, there's still obviously a veil, but there's a physical veil between the two worlds, but it's very much, it's very thin. I'll just say that. If there's any veil at all, it's thin. I personally don't have a veil. I can see people, but a lot of people can't. Most people can't see people, but I can. I've always been able to do that. Yeah. And psychedelics had a lot to do with that. I didn't have that many psychedelics because I actually don't feel like I actually have needed them because I've already been so turned on, if you will. But I do believe that is from all the experiences that I had as a child where I was strapped down to a trip chair and like, oops, oh goodness, all of those things. So with that, I'm going to complete this. I'm sending you tons of blessings and love. Thanks for listening to me. I'm not feeling well today, so I do feel like I need to go. I'm trying to keep them at a less than an hour. For each chapter. I mean, it's a lot. So I'm trying to get it to, cap it at an hour. So thank you for listening. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for witnessing this and listening to this story, the story time of the mass control, engineering human consciousness. And we're on chapter 11, and there are 29 chapters. And it gets really crazy coming up. So I'm kind of excited to read it to you. Yes, I am. Okay. Have a beautiful evening or morning. Good morning, Layla. I love you. In Bosnia. Have a beautiful day, honey. Bye.